Love Me Do, the Beatles. Despite my prediction, nobody stepped on them. Around the time that the Shadows were releasing Apache, I remember we heard a demo by a new band from Liverpool. It was a cover of Dizzy Miss Lizzy, a 1958 rock and roll song by Larry Williams. And it was dreadful, horrible. This sounds like a band who will always be playing their local church hall, I said to the others. How wrong can one man be? Well, the Beatles may have made an unpromising early demo, but they were to get a whole lot better very, very quickly. Later, in 1960, they left for Hamburg, where they honed their musical chops by playing more than 250 shows in about 2 years. Why did they go there? Well, they claimed it was partly down to me. Paul McCartney reputedly said that one reason the Beatles went off to Germany was that Cliff and the Shadows had got everything sewn up in Britain. We were riding high then, but I never imagined we were forcing our rivals to emigrate. But if it's true, I guess we played a big part in their career, because when they came back, they were terrific. When the Beatles enjoyed a top 20 hit in Britain in autumn 1962 with their debut single, Love Me Do, they sounded a different band completely. The Shadows and I loved the song from the first hearing. In fact, I can remember exactly what I thought when I heard it. Oh, I wish we had that song first. Love Me Do was a fantastic pop rock tune. It was beautifully direct and simple. It was a slow-paced rock and roll track with blares of mouth organ and two voices harmonizing sweetly. Paul McCartney had this high, clean voice. John Lennon's was lower and more guttural, and they slotted together perfectly. In fact, I liked Love Me Do so much that I did some unpaid freelance promotional work for it. Cliff Richard and the Shadows were about to do our second tour of South Africa. On our first visit in 1961, I'd done a few radio interviews where the DJs asked me if they could play a favorite song for me. I couldn't think of anything quickly enough, so I just said, "Play anything by Elvis." So on our second visit, I took my copy of Love Me Do with me and asked all of the DJs who interviewed me to give it a spin. I told them all the truth. We really wish that we had this song. Everybody liked it, and one DJ asked me on air if I thought that the Beatles might go on to be huge. Not really, I laughed. Their name sounds like something you might step on. I really was not doing well with my Beatles predictions. By the time we got back to Britain, the Beatles had gone to number 2 with their follow-up single, Please Please Me. It was clear something big was happening. They didn't really sound like anybody else. Their songs were great, but they also had their finger on the pulse of commercial appeal. Radio loved them. I thought I'd like to meet the Beatles, and I was to get the opportunity very quickly. Bruce Welch phoned me up in March 1963. He was having a party at his house that Friday night, and the Beatles were going to drop in after they had played a gig at Lewisham Odeon. Would I like to come? Yes, please. It sounded too good to miss. The Beatles turned up pretty early that night. They had only played 4 songs in Lewisham. They were the support act to 2 American rockers, Chris Montez and Tommy Rowe. And as you do at all good parties, we quickly found ourselves sitting and chatting in the kitchen. It was all very relaxed. They were fun to talk to. Paul seemed an easygoing guy, and Ringo was a fun, chatty bloke. John had more of an edge to him, but he was a really funny character. George Harrison was friendly, but didn't say very much. Well, I guess they did always call him the quiet one. Mostly we talked and talked and talked about music. We compared notes on the artists that we liked, and they were pretty much identical. We raved about Chuck Berry and John Lee Hooker and Buddy Holly. The Beatles adored Buddy Holly. I didn't know when I met them that even before their lousy version of Dizzy Miss Lizzy, their first demo had been That'll Be the Day, and they called themselves the Beatles in order to be named after insects like Buddy's band, the Crickets. And the Beatles definitely shared my passionate formative love of Elvis. Paul and John had been in a skiffle band, the Quarrymen, like me, and had been moved to start playing rock and roll by Elvis, like me. I always say that if there had been no Elvis, there'd have been no Cliff Richard. You know what? I think I'd add that without Elvis, there would have been no Beatles either. He was the catalyst for all of us. One thing I picked up quickly in the kitchen was that John Lennon was slightly weird. He was very witty, but also he was quite an off-the-wall individual. He made a lot of acerbic comments. While we were talking about music, I told him how much I liked Ray Charles. "Do you?" I asked him. "Oh, I used to like Ray Charles," John replied, "but now that everybody else likes him, I can't be bothered." Huh? I thought to myself, surely you either like Ray Charles or you don't. Don't get me wrong, though. John was very nice to me. I think he was aware that the Shadows and I were established stars at that point, while the Beatles were just starting out. He even made a joke about it. "Can you delay your next single coming out, please, Cliff, to give our new one a chance?" "What's it going to be?" I asked him. "We recorded it 3 weeks ago, but we're still not quite sure about it," he said. Bruce Welch always had guitars and instruments lying around the house, and that evening was no exception. There was a guitar leaning against the kitchen wall. He handed it to John. "Go on," Bruce said. "Play it for us now." I have told this story so many times in my life, and it never fails to give me goosebumps. The Beatles looked at one another, shrugged, and nodded. John began to strum the guitar, and he, Paul, and George started to sing, in beautiful harmony, "If There's Anything That You Want." They fired out the first few notes of "From Me to You," and it sounded incredible. In fact, they played the whole song as the Shadows and I sat in the kitchen, our mouths hanging open. I don't think I'd ever heard a more surefire hit record in my life, yet the Beatles were worried about it. John finished playing and put the guitar down. "But we're still not sure about it," he repeated. "Oh my God, are you kidding?" Bruce asked incredulously. "That is amazing. It's a potential number one." Bruce had far more faith in the song than they did, and I've learned over the years that nobody has better ears or is better at spotting a hit than Bruce Welch. I've sung Beatles songs over the years. I covered both "I Saw Her Standing There" and a Beatles obscurity called "I'll Be Back" on my Don't Stop Me Now album in 1967. And I was very pleased with the version of "And I Love Her" that I did on my Wanted album in 2001. And yet, ultimately, I think my favorite Beatles song might still just be that debut single from back in 1962. I would love to sing "Love Me Do" and find my own way to interpret it. Maybe I'll finally get around to it when I make my next album, because I still wish the Shadows and I had had that song.